Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in the fantasy circle because this is a beautiful and peaceful part of the garden that has a couple of troughs on display, because we've got a program for you today where our director, Mark Weathington, is going to teach you how to build a trough of your own. This is a very useful skill that helps you build up the vertical dimension of your garden, add a bit more texture and interest, and it also expands the amount of plants that you can have. So this is a good thing to know how to do, so we are grateful to have this program here for you today. Those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I think I could pass things over to Mark to show us how to build a trough.
Excellent. Thank you, Blake. Mark here, and I'm really excited to show you all how to make troughs. It's something I actually hadn't done in a while. Used to do these a lot, used to teach classes. Since I came here 17 years ago, we've got a couple of great volunteers who do this as that's what they do, is make troughs and bird baths out of hypertufa. So I haven't had to do that. And we actually, if you come to the Arboretum, you go around, you'll see some big troughs that were made by Amelia and Beth Jimenez. So I'm gonna start off with, what is a trough? People in the plant world sometimes talk about troughs, especially the folks that like doing alpine and rock gardening is where it tends to be. This is a trough. This is a true trough. It is very old. It is granite, and it was chiseled out by hand. And you can see kind of on the outside, you can see kind of the ribs going down. You can see that on the inside. And I suppose I could teach you how to make a trough, you know, and get you out here and I've never actually done that. Troughs are, as the name would imply, these were things that were made kind of all over the world. You see them in Asia, you see them in Europe, and they're made as water troughs for livestock. So you can get really big ones. Some of the characteristics of a typical stone trough is they are usually rectangular. They're usually not very deep. So we have some large ones here at the Arboretum that are going to be going into a new garden, and they are this tall, but the depth that's actually carved out is actually not a whole lot deeper than this, which is about 5 inches or so. One thing you probably realize, if these are for water, for troughs, they generally, true troughs, don't have any drain holes. The large ones sometimes do, kind of on the side, that would get plugged and you could pull out that drain. But they're shallow for a couple reasons. One, you don't want water to sit in there for too long, because then it gets gross and can get your livestock sick. And two, it's really hard to carve out real deep in a piece of stone. So why don't we just use these stone troughs? Well, one, it is difficult to put a hole in one that's like this. Two, they are very expensive if you find one. Three, they're very difficult to make if you don't want to go find an old one. And four, if you can get one, they are heavy. They are heavy. So, at some point, and I don't know enough of my hypertufa history, people started making imitation ones. And hypertufa is porous volcanic stone. And I suppose, and you can find troughs made of true tufa. That you don't find very often, because it's very sharp. It really is not pleasant to handle unless it's really been sanded down. And even then, the slightest bump, it'll chip off and be razor sharp again. But hypertufa is fake tufa. And it's designed to look like stone for the most part. This is an old one that I've had for ages and ages, and it's light compared to that other one. It is very light. And it has nice drain holes in it. And this is a pretty typical size for a lot of troughs that you see. I have, over the years, made troughs all kinds of different sizes, and I'll talk a little bit more about things to look out for when you do that. But this is one, gosh, I've had this thing for so long, I don't even remember building it. But, you know, you can still see it's kind of, this is one where I kind of smoothed it out and didn't really rough it up. I'll show you some different ways to manage this. And this was using a recipe that I used to use. And I'll talk about the hypertufa recipes as well. So let's get into it, because it's really pretty simple. You start with your mix, and while you're kind of mixing this up like it's batter, you really want to think about this more as stir fry than baking. I can never be a baker. I could never be a carpenter, because that's all about measuring and precision. And if you go online and you look for recipes for hypertufa, everybody has their own recipe. They're all different. Usually the main characteristics are Portland cement. There's some that do it with quickcrete or fast drying cement. Portland cement will be much stronger if you do it right than quickcrete. So you got Portland cement. Then you need usually some organic matter and something to make it light. The organic matter helps it to look more natural, and you want to lighten it up. You can do it out of pure cement. It's just then you've got something that's like the stone. It's super heavy, and quite honestly, it looks like cement. A lot of people, to strengthen it, will put in fiberglass fibers or acrylic fibers, and I used to do that. And actually, we're going to test Alexander out here. Can you get like in this corner here? How close can you get? Can you see little fibers in there?
Yeah.
So those little fibers, think of that like rebar in concrete. It kind of ties it together and it gives the concrete something to bind to, and that can make it stronger. And I used to do that, and I stopped because, I don't know, I got cheap, I got lazy, something happened, and I stopped doing that. And what I found was my troughs held up just as well without them, so why go through the effort and expense? So, like I said, so many different recipes, and I've used a bunch, but I have finally come down to what I think is the best recipe, because I don't have to look it back up. I used to have all kinds of sheets printed out, copied from magazines. Actually, most of my old sheets were copied from magazines, because that was pre-internet when I was doing this starting out, or at least printing things off the internet. And I used to go through there, and then I would tweak it, but I'd always have to go back to them. But what I finally realized is it's simple. I do 1 part Portland cement, 1 part perlite, 1 part peat moss. That's it. Now, if you don't want to use peat moss, and some people don't, if you get loose coconut fiber, like what you use in the hanging baskets, but it's got to be loose, that'll serve kind of the same purpose that the peat does, but also that those acrylic fibers do, is give something a little bit longer to bind to and gives a little more natural color. So, since it's 1 part, 1 part, 1 part, if you run out of perlite a little bit, it won't be quite as light. If you run out of Portland cement, it'll be a lot lighter, may not be quite as sturdy. I used to always overdo the Portland cement because I wanted them to last for ages. And what I found is I have some that I've had for 15, 20 years, and it has made no difference how I've made them. So, got, help me out with my counting. I'm gonna go ahead and start with 3 scoops of Portland cement. It always either goes not nearly as far as you would think, or 3 or 4 times as far as you think it's going to. Got some peat moss here, not sphagnum moss, peat moss. Some people will get their peat moss wet before they do this. I don't do that because I want to kind of control the water, but I also know I've got it really well mixed when all the peat moss is wet and well integrated. And sometimes when it's wet to start, I have a harder time with that. So, 3 of those. Got my perlite here. Perlite is different than vermiculite. People sometimes use them interchangeably. Vermiculite is kind of looks a little like reflective, like little bits of mica almost, but it will compress. And so it won't provide kind of that airspace that's in there. Now, a lot of times I will mix a little bit of vermiculite in because it does that little bit of reflective, that does kind of mimic stone really well. So I often will do that. I don't have any vermiculite right now. I will say also, there is a lot of dust when you're dealing with Portland cement and perlite. You may want to wear a mask. Also, when you get Portland cement wet, it is exothermic. It will create heat, so not always the best thing on a really hot day. And it will affect some people's skin. A lot of people need to wear gloves to do this. Not me, because I'm an old gardener and I've got, leather hands now. I don't measure my water because it will be different. Sometimes your material has a little bit more moisture in it, sometimes less. It's going to be a little more water than, more than the 3 scoops that I did. But I always start with a little less water than I know I'm going to need. Start to get it mixed up, a little bit of moisture in there so it kind of starts sticking together, but that I can get a really good mix on there going. And then as I go along, I'll add more water. And if you get it too wet, you can throw in some more material, just in that 1-1-1 kind of ratio. And if I'm doing really small batches, I'll often do it just by hand. Again, you may want to use gloves for that. My liability disclaimer there, Blake. Use gloves.
Love it.
My wife always wishes I would use gloves when I garden. She's like, "You're the director. You should not have these dirty fingernails." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's how they know that I'm the real deal. I know what I'm talking about."
It's a badge of honor, definitely.
That's right.
You can't take gardening advice from someone with smooth hands.
I did an interview once where I shook the hand of the owner. I was really interviewing with his son, and this was out of college, and the owner said, "His hands are too soft." Everybody laughed and like it was a joke. I did not get a job offer, so I don't know how much of a joke it really was. All right. I am still a little wet here. I put in a little too much water. There's a little bit on purpose because I wanted to show you how easy it is to fix it all. But what you're going for in this mix is kind of a thick cottage cheese. Think of it that way, is kind of what you want. So I'll put in a little more of everything. Not even full scoops right now. Get this all mixed in. This is why I always have more material than I need, is because I keep, I add material and then I'm like, oh gosh, I need a little more water. And then I'll add more water. And it's great when you're making brownies because you can never have too many brownies. But if you look in here, you can see I've still got dry peat moss in here. And that's kind of my telltale that this isn't really well mixed. And what'll happen is if I start using it, I'll come across some dry spots, and those are going to be weak spots when my piece dries out. All right. I think I've got it in pretty good shape.
Nice.
And you can see it's kind of like, good cottage cheese. I don't know about good cottage cheese. My wife has a new cottage cheese that she likes, and she keeps telling me I'll probably like it, but I don't know about cottage cheese. So, the next step, or probably something you should have thought about before you even started this, is what's your mold gonna be? And there's a couple different ways of doing a mold. I'm gonna do what I think is the easiest way. Plastic bags are your friends. And the number of times I have started making finished making a trough and realized I forgot to put down anything to separate my hypertufa from what it was going on and what it would stick on is legion. So I just take a plastic bag, throw it down. Some people will spray the plastic bag with like a cooking oil or something like that. I've never found that to be necessary, but you can. I've never found it to be necessary, except for one of the troughs I built this weekend. I broke because I couldn't get it out of the form. So in this way, you're just building on top of it. You're making your trough upside down. That's probably the easiest way. And actually, I want to do it shallower than that because I've got a small base to do it on. But like I said, you don't need to do thick. The other way I'll often do build troughs is I'll do one inside of another. So I'll put down a layer of my material. Then I'll put something both for drainage, but also to hold up the second piece. I'll put the second piece on top, and then I'll fill in all the way around it with my hypertufa mix. And then I'm basically making a pot. I pull this out, pull it out of the inside pot. Bags, do your bags there, otherwise it's not as easy as it sounds. But it's as simple as this. You want about 2 inches of material. And you really want to make sure your corners get nice and thick, because that's where you always wind up being thinnest, is in those corners. It's like making mud pies. It's really very satisfying.
No doubt.
The thicker your inside is, the taller you go, you're going to have to get pretty wide. So you'll have these long lips as opposed to kind of these, straight sides on there when you do it this way. And when you take it out, you can knock some of those edges off if you don't like that. But I don't really see anything wrong with them. And as you put it in, you make sure it's all melding in with each other. I'm a little on the wet side with this, but I do that on purpose when we have hot temperatures. It's very hot out. And one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're doing these, working with Portland cement, and working with this kind of thing, is they think it's like ceramics or clay, in that you want it hot and dry like you're putting it in a kiln. That is not the case. You want Portland cement to dry slowly. The slower, the better. That makes it stronger. And nothing you do once you're done, is going to make it heavier. So you want to make it as strong as possible with the least amount of weight. That's the goal. And it really is this easy. Kind of did it on probably too small a base, because I do want to be able to move this afterwards. I mean, hey, I put in the effort. I might as well get the payoff for it, right? And I will often, when I do this, if I'm unsure, I'll go to those corners and I'll see how deep I've done them, and then I'll fix them back. And these are pretty shallow still, but it's such a low frame. It's going to be so light. I think it's okay. I say 2 inches because almost no matter what size you do, you don't need to get thicker than 2 inches. You can go a bit thinner if you're going small, but you still want to make sure you have those corners in good shape. So again, we don't want to go through the issues we have with our real trough in terms of not being able to drain. So when you do it this way, it's really easy just to go in there and put a couple holes in right now and leave it like that. Really is that simple. Now, it is hot outside right now for us. You want to do these in the shade. You don't want to leave it out baking in the sun. If you don't have shade, make some shade. Make this, put it on a board, put it in your crawl space under your house or something like that where it's cooler. And then I cover especially when it's warm like this, with a piece of burlap that is that I've already wet down. And then I'll usually cover again with a piece of plastic, because I really want to keep moisture in there. And if you can't get it out in shade, then come out and actually hose this down, a couple of times a day if you can, because you really want it to be a slow cure. Now, slow is, what is slow? Slow can be a lot of things, but for this, really it'll set in, depending on weather, 24 to 48 hours, you will get it pretty solid. So I got extra hypertufa stuff. What do I do with this? Well, a lot of times you just kind of take it out, just clump it down, put it on a piece of plastic, and let it go like that. And then you can take it, and this is a piece of hypertufa that you can see somebody drilled into. It was just a lump that was left over, and somebody drilled in with just drill bit, with the idea that you could put some soil in there and grow little plants in that. I wouldn't do it this way personally. I would take maybe a 1/2 to 3/4 inch drill and drill down in there, but with small holes, and plant little tiny plants in there. You can do little succulents, little alpine plants. And the deal with hypertufa is it is porous. So if you settle this into some other soil, into a larger trough or into your garden, you'll get moisture that wicks up into this. And it also won't over water this. And a lot of those little alpine plants do not want their leaves touching the ground. They want to be on grit or rock or something like that, and they'll send roots down really deep. So you can drill into this while it's still soft pretty easily. Occasionally you'll break it, but you just take it slow. If you're drilling a small hole deep in there, I usually will take something smaller, 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch, something like that. Drill down, then go with 1/4 inch, and then 1/2 inch, and then 3/4 inch. It doesn't take long, but you can do that with your extra. Don't do it in your mixing container though, because then it'll just stick to that pretty much. So, what do you do after that? Hold on. Wash my hands a little bit. So it's like a cooking show. I got it at all stages. So here is one that I did on Sunday. Today is Wednesday as we record this. I did this on Sunday. It's a nice little square one. You see, not too deep. Nice thick edges like a trough would be. I already came in, and you get these little sharp edges and things in there, and I just go through and kind of whack off the edges a little bit, because I want it to look older. I don't want it to look too young, so I want it to look like it's worn and whatnot. And the outside, well, here you can see on the bottom, you can see how smooth it is. That's that plastic bag that was on there. It's got a weird little pattern, because I'll show you what I did it in just a second. You can see I put in small drain holes. These are very small because it's what I had on hand. But you see the sides don't look so much like they were inside that plastic bag. And that's because I just took a wire brush and real quickly just and got that smoothness off. I mean, got that plastic fake looking smoothness off. And you see with the perlite in there and the peat moss in there, it has this very, very kind of natural look to it. A little bit of vermiculite really dresses that up as well. Now let's see, this is one I did on Monday night, so 2 nights ago. Same setup as my first one there. Hey, look at that. You really can use anything. I had this bigger square, and I wanted to do it in that, and I looked around for something that was the right size that gave me a couple inches, and got that. So now let's see how easy it comes out of here. Don't use containers that have things that go inward on there. You don't want it to be narrower at the top than it is at the bottom because you'll never get it out. It's like unwrapping a Christmas present. And this is something you want to look out for. This means my plastic bag got folded inside the cement when I was making it. And you really want to make sure if you're doing it this way that you're keeping the plastic bag tight so it doesn't do this, because that's going to be a weak spot in here. And if this plastic is too deep, it may be a spot where it breaks along there at some point, soon or later. I obviously did not get my plastic as well on this one as I did the first one, but you can see it's in pretty good shape. Now, I did not put a drain hole in here because I want to use this for some bog plants, some carnivorous plants. So I'm just going to do a carnivorous plant mix in here. And since this is porous, some water will seep through. It won't be completely airtight. So I take my hammer first and kind of go around and, you know, beat down some of these tall spots. So again, this was two days ago. I got off work, I made this, and I'm taking it out now. I've kept it, I did it in a walk-in crawl space at my house, so it was cooler and darker. I put some damp burlap over it. I'm taking it out. Now it's still soft. If I let this go for a week, it is much harder, and it doesn't just kind of crush in like this real easily. And that's what I want right now, because I want to kind of clean it up a little bit easier than otherwise. Now, occasionally when you do this, you will break your thing apart, but the materials are not too expensive or difficult to get. So I prefer to do it while it's nice and light, nice and workable. So you see you've got the plastic bag. You can see that plastic bag, but it doesn't take much with a wire brush. And actually where you got that plastic bag, you get kind of the look of natural stone. So, you know, look at that compared to what we started with. Pretty easy to do and not a whole lot of effort really. So that's the easy part. Now, I made one very much like what we made today, last night. And I always say 24 to 48 hours. So let's see what we got. This is a nice small one. Have not pulled it open yet, so we'll see. All right. So you can see I just did one of those blocks that I did today. Now is when you get to have a little bit of fun. And this is when it sticks in like this. This is where sometimes you break it. So we're going to just be gentle with it. You ever see Roadhouse?
Oh yeah.
You're polite with it until it's time to stop being polite.
Be nice.
So get some of these corners where it's overlapping a little bit. Moving in there, so it shouldn't be too bad. Woo. Although I may just have broken it. I think I did. Oh, I'm 2 for 2. 2 for 4, I mean.
Jeez.
Now you can see that it wasn't faked. This is what happens if you go too early. So, and you can see here, I rushed yesterday. I've got some peat that's still in kind of big clumps that didn't meld. And if I had waited, as this was moving, my form was moving, was getting out of there. This needed another day of curing before it was ready to have something taken out. But you can see I cheated a little bit. I did it pretty low in these corners, which is where it broke. Said it's so low I can get away with it, but it was too thin. Way too thin in a couple spots. So that's what you need to look out for. That was on purpose. I wanted to make sure you saw it fail miserably.
Perfect demonstration, Mark. Well done.
That's right. I try my best. So, do we have questions?
There are a handful of questions. Right out of the gate, Jacqueline wanted to know if you had any recommendations for YouTube videos for DIY trough fabrication.
I don't. In a week or so, you could do this one.
Watch this YouTube video.
I will say this about that. One of the things that I find that YouTubers, online experts, a lot of not online experts want to do with gardening and DIY things and whatever, is to make it seem more difficult than it is. You will get these ingredient lists of things for troughs that are 5, 8 different things, and they'll tell you how important each one is and what each one does. They don't. It's making Portland cement lighter is the whole thing. Making it look like stone. You can add some things that will make it look more like stone. Like I said, you can put some acrylic fiber in there. But acrylic fiber wouldn't have helped this one that just fell apart. I made it too thin and I opened it up too early. It wasn't really at the point of curing where I should have come out. Doing that 48 hours, especially the square ones that I had those outside covered with this. This little one, I did it under my house where it was much cooler and needed a little more time. But I don't know other than this one in a week.
For sure. One. It's good stuff. So Sandra wants to know if there's a weight limit to what can be held. Like she's asking specifically if you have like a hypertufa plant bowl on top of a hypertufa pedestal, is there a limit to how much weight you can put on this?
If it's built well, like you would, I take this out after 48 hours and I rough it up. You would not want to do something that would put a lot of strain on it for another week or two. The reason you're taking it out of its form so early is so that it's easy to kind of rough up or shape, or if you decided after you had done this one that you didn't want bog plants, drilling a hole through it now is a lot easier than it'll be in 2 weeks when it hardens up more. So once it's dry, that pedestal should hold quite a bit as long as it's well made. And, if you're going to put a lot of weight on that pedestal, you might want to go to the side of more Portland cement than less on it. But I don't know, like, what's its structural integrity kind of thing.
Sure enough. Well, you were talking about you said to cure it another week after you've gone through the texturing process. Marilyn wants to know if you still cover it with plastic during that time.
If it is really hot and dry, yeah, I'll keep it covered. I'll at least put it in the shade. I mean, even just shoved up under a bush and kind of left there is fine. And if you're out with a hose, throw splash a little water on it. But yeah, you don't want to, even at this stage, if you put it out and let it bake, it will fall apart. I made the mistake of doing this as a workshop with some teachers, and without thinking about it, I did it in an empty glass house that we hadn't had because it was raining that day, and they were supposed to get moved out, and me, didn't. And they came in the next week. It was, one class. They came in the next week and uncovered them, and they were just dust.
Oh boy!
We probably could have made new troughs with the stuff there because it was just it never bound together at all.
Sure. Well, that's good stuff to think about. Definitely. Okay. Maria wants to know. And Marilyn kind of had the same. Maria says if you stick a wine cork in for drainage instead of like PVC, would that work? And then Marilyn was wanting to know like what kinds of things does hypertufa not stick to so that you can use for molds or holes and that kind of thing.
It sticks to most things, like plastic that you can peel off is okay.
Yeah.
But like when I use PVC in there, I leave the PVC in.
Sure.
It's, you know, a wine cork, you're not getting that out.
Sure
There's
enough.
no way. Now, you could use a wine cork to put in there, and you could, you know, take it out, and then if you wanted to grow your bog plants, you could put that in there and let it fill up. You could,
Right.
you know, if you wanted to replant with something else, you could take it out. But you would need something around it. Now, I know some people do use will put oil on things.
Okay.
Some people, even on the plastic, will spray it with, the plastic bag will spray it with like cooking oil or something like that to just get it while it's really just for while it's drying to keep it from sticking. So
Okay.
while so it doesn't need to last really even
Sure.
that long, but that would be a way to get almost anything out if you could.
Well, while you were pulling the bag out, you kind of notice how like it's getting trapped in like little micro crevices in the thing.
Right.
So like the smoother what you're using is, the less it'll get stuck, and also the smoother your mold is, the less it'll get stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Okie dokie. This is a great question. Gail wants to know if you can add color.
You can, and this original one, you can see this had some concrete coloring material in there, so it's a different it's a different color. So you can add that, and you don't have to try and make it look like it's stone. You know, that is the traditional way. But actually, the teachers' ones that I ruined, I told them to bring in some stuff that, you know, they liked or whatever. And, you know, there's somebody brought in like little marble type glass things that had put in there and whatever. I've done it with when my kids were little, but they had, you know, like little knickknacks, pins they had gotten, just little stuff that was just hanging around, and we made some hypertufa pots, and we put all those in there. You know, each kid got to do one with all their little stuff, and I got that junk out of the house and into the garden. But
definitely, and it adds like a sentimental aspect to the trough, a bit more meaning to it for you.
And I'm a big believer in you do whatever brings you joy. You know, there are people who would probably say, no, you don't do that with troughs. Troughs are a specific, hypertufa troughs are a thing.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, no, if it's stuff and you want to put it in there, go for it. Follow your heart.
Exactly.
Awesome. Diane, Diane's pointing out that the bottom of the one you made today will not be flat, and she wants to know how you can then use it if the bottom's not flat.
Well, there are a couple things. I'm glad that was asked. So, something I will often do on one of these is I'll take my leftover material, which is now getting a little bit dry, but that's okay, and I'll, you know, make some little feet or, you know, supports for it or something like that.
Sure enough, yeah.
This is not going to stick now. Yeah, this has really gotten too dry. I need to re-wet it a little bit to do it. But you can see how quickly it will dry out if you're not careful.
Sure. But you could presumably like put some plastic down and like put like a book on top of that or something just to flatten it out.
And you know, this is a little more flat, but this is the one area on this that's been worked a little bit to get it smoother down here.
Sure.
But I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Because I usually use these in the garden.
Sure.
So, you know, I set it and I'll, you know, move a little soil around underneath it to get it to sit. But you can certainly put legs on it.
Totally. Okie dokie. Marilyn's asking, besides a hammer and wire brush, do you have any other suggestions for texturing or adding designs to the outside?
You know, sky's the limit, I suppose. I have a wire brush that goes on my drill. I just couldn't find it, so I use that sometimes. You know, I brought there's a little chisel in the hammer, not really to show, as a joke, to say you could carve out your own, but to show you that and I didn't really, that you can go down along the sides and kind of chisel it. You got to be very careful with that. You don't want to go deep, and if you hit it the wrong angle, you really can get in there. But I tend to be a pretty simple person, you know, a little bit of roughing up, and that's fine.
Sure.
So I've been waiting for one question that hadn't come.
And most of the questions are gone, so ask it yourself.
I will. So one of the questions we often get, and one of the things you will often hear people tell you is, this is cement. It is very, very basic. It's limestone. It's, plants want some acidity in the soil. And I've seen things where they say, once it's completely, give it a month to dry, and then put it for 2 months in a barrel of water to soak and leach all that out, changing the water every so often, or to bury it in the garden for 6 months or a year or something like that. And I say, ain't nobody got time for that. I plant this thing. I'll give these ones I just made a week or so to get a little bit drier, and then I will plant them, and I will have no issues with it. You've got to really plant some pretty particular things. Bog plants grow in very acid soils. I am going to have an acid soil. Bog plants often grow, mountain bogs grow in, acid soils on granite, so that's, I have never found that to be an issue. The biggest downside to them being basic and not acidic is mosses don't grow on basic areas. Mosses grow in acidic spots. So if you want them to look really old and get moss growing on them sooner rather than later, then you can do some of these things like, mix, grind up moss with yogurt or with sour cream or something like that, and coat the outside with that mixture.
Sure.
And then hit it every once in a while with, the last swallow of your beer or some old milk or something like that. And you can get them. Needless to say, as a lazy gardener, I don't do that. What I do enjoy is over time, 4 or 5 years of it being out in the garden, all of a sudden, especially if you've got a lot of perlite in there, the perlite will start going green, and then eventually you'll start seeing a little bit of moss here and there on it, especially if it's in kind of a woodland type garden.
Sure.
Now, a lot of people who grow use these traditionally for very, alpine sun-loving plants, and so you'll never get moss growing them out like that.
No kidding. Gene just put a question in the chat that says, can you pat moss onto the outside when curing?
The moss would stick to it while it was curing.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't grow. It would be dead moss because it would just be too basic, especially while it's wet. It just would
absolutely
fry the moss.
I guess maybe it might contribute to the texture or something like that.
Oh, for sure.
While it's wet, just patting it down with something.
Yeah,
so, that's a
And
thought.
it may even kill it quick enough that it stays green. Or use that the dead sheet moss stuff and put some of that on there, and
definitely. Okay, well, that looks like that is all of the questions for today. So thank you so much, Mark, for pulling together this presentation. And
it was fun.
Yeah, for sure. It really does seem like way too easy to, I don't know what my head thought went into making a trough like this, but it's like, it's just equal parts everything and just let it.
It is, and I've done great big ones.
Sure.
And I should say, if you're doing big ones, do thick styrofoam or wood in pieces that you can pin or screw together. Screw those boards. I've done big ones where it's one inside the other, kind of like the big ones we have out here. And if you do it that way, then you can unscrew the outside, the boards will fall away. You can unscrew the inside and pull those in.
Sure.
And then you can reuse them and do more, of the same size. So you can do a series of them.
Definitely.
It's pretty easy that way.
Nice. Well, it's great. Thank you so much for sharing all this stuff with us, Mark. This was fantastic. And thank you for joining us, everybody. We will be back with the midweek program next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. The interns will be taking over the midweek program, so be sure to join us for that to help give them some good hands-on experience in public horticulture. We will see you all there next time. Y'all take care.